Mental Health Resource for Students and Parents webinar. My name is Lucia Martinez. I'm the Director of Constituent Services for Senator Brooks, and thank you for joining us this evening where we have extraordinary special guest speakers that will be answering questions and discussing resources and supports available for students and parents during this COVID-19. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us. At this moment, I would like to take the opportunity to let you know that there's going to be some language options. We're going to be offering Spanish translations for this event. Shortly, we're going to turn on the Zoom interpretation features, and you'll see a button pop up on your screen. If you would like to hear this in Spanish, click on the interpretation button and choose Spanish. If you want to hear this in English, you don't need to do anything.
Buenas noches y bienvenido a esta reunión de teleconferencia. Queremos dejarles saber que tenemos algunas opciones para esta webinar. Estamos ofreciendo traducción en español para este evento. En breve activaremos la función de interpretación de Zoom y verá un botón emergente en su pantalla. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, haga clic en el botón Interpretación y elija Español. If you want to hear this event in English, no need to click on any options. Thank you.
We also have some Zoom application options. We have the chat, the raise hand, and the Q&A. In the chat, we will be sharing, throughout the webinar, we'll be sharing the links, as well as if you have any difficulties in seeing or not able to hear or see the webinar, please use the raise your hand. And of course, the Q&A will be to submit your questions. At this moment, I would like to introduce to you the panelists that we have this evening. We have with us Senator John Brooks, myself, Lucia Martinez, Joa Gavino, who's the Director of Communications, Melody Janza, she's External Relations Associate. We also have with us our wonderful Community Outreach Work Group. We have Jessica E. Fernandez, Partnership Specialist in Community Engagement for the U.S. Census. Pastor Dante Godot, he's from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He's Freeport and Rockville Center. We also have Daphne Irizarry, President of LILTA, Long Island Latino Teachers Association. And we also have Maria Jordan Awalam. She's the Freeport District Board of Trustees. Thank you for joining us today. And I would also like to introduce you our wonderful guest speakers that we have. We have Taryn, her last name is Contigion, and she's the Community Education Manager, VIBES, Family Violence and Rape Crisis Center. We also have Susan Yegel. She is Nassau County Department of Human Services, Office of Mental Health, Chemical Dependency and Developmental Disability Services. We have Dr. Eric Walsh, Medical Director of Public Health Specialist. Dr. Gregson Pigot, Director of the Office of Minority Health in the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. Again, thank you very much for being with us today. And at this moment, it is a privilege and an honor to introduce you to our 8th Senatorial District, Senator John Brooks. But before I do that, I would like to address that we have two different Facebooks, one in Spanish and the other one is in English. You can see it on your screen, and please feel free to give us a phone call with any issues or concerns you might have. You know, he has bilingual staff to answer any questions for anybody who speaks Spanish. And I just want to thank Senator Brooks really for making this happen, for you know, making the webinar possible and making sure the community is informed. Then thank you, Senator Brooks, so much for your leadership.
Thank you, Lucia. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I want to first thank all of our panelists for joining us, number one, and for the very important work they do to help those individuals who have some challenges associated with mental health. I also want to thank the additional guest speakers that we have. As Lucia said, this is part two. I think the first program went exceptionally well. I hope that you find the information you received tonight, helpful in any challenges that you may be working on in this area. And once again, I hope all of you got through the storm the other day well. And we'll get the show on the road here and let you receive this very important information from these most talented people. And lastly, I just want to thank my staff for all the work that they've done with all of these webinars. It's great information getting out to people, I hope, at the right time. Thank you all, and please enjoy.
Thank you very much, Senator Brooks. This evening, we will be discussing supporting parents and families during COVID-19. It's going to be by Tyron. And then we have Susan. She's going to be talking about developmental disability services and support in Nassau County. Then Dr. Eric Walsh, he's going to be addressing anxiety, depression, and mental health supports. Dr. Pigot, he's going to be addressing mental health support in Suffolk County. And we also have Jessica Fernandez. She will be talking a little bit about the importance of the census and the participation we need to really make sure that we are addressing. At this moment, I would like to welcome Community Education Manager, Vibes, Tyron. Thank you so much for joining us and for being part of this wonderful webinar. We appreciate your time. And please, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank Senator Brooks, as well as Melody, of course, the working group, and everyone who is able to spend some time with us this evening. It's an amazing opportunity to connect with you in this way, and we're grateful to be able to not only give you this information, but have this as something that you can keep in your pocket, in your mind, in the event that you may need this for yourself, or in the event that something or someone resonates with you while you're listening to the information throughout this presentation. So I'd like to just mention my contact information is below. Please feel free to reach out to me at any point if you would like any additional information on anything that I'm about to speak about, or if you would like more information about any aspect of Vibes that I will be discussing this evening. You could go ahead, please. So first, we're going to be really identifying some of the ripple effects of COVID-19 on identifying and reporting child abuse. So one of the most crucial aspects of school and of the learning environment is the ability for teachers, coaches, after-school program coordinators, advisors, mentors, to really not only serve as that role model and mentor for youth, but also to serve as those mandated reporters. Not only to observe physical signs and symptoms of potential abuse, neglect, but also to observe behavioral changes over time, things that generally when you're spending time in a physical sense with somebody, connecting with them day after day, or in portions of your day over time in a more repetitive way when people are more in front of you in a group. These are things that are really problematic at this point for mandated reporters. So the amount of mandated reporters right now has decreased for children in the in terms of schools, in terms of the ability for other individuals to notice and pick up on instances of abuse and neglect. And there's also limited interactions. So while we have remote learning in place, and while we're interacting and our educators are interacting with children and their peers through virtual learning environments, there's a lot that's lacking and missing in that experience. So, some of those things include the lack of ability to notice, again, some of those physical signs, things like odor, things like hygiene, changes in that student's body language, their overall way that they're carrying themselves and getting themselves through that day. Also interactions with peers. So because the interactions are structured in such a way as to provide education, which is the most crucial component at this point, there are interactions and pieces of interactions that we may have taken for granted before as part of the natural human experience and as part of education that now are compromised or are completely eliminated in some cases. Take something like home visits, for example, or more one-on-one visits. So we've heard in Vibes, from a lot of agencies that work with children, parents, and also seniors, that the ability to properly assess a home and to conduct a home visit is really, at least 50%, change, at least 50% different in terms of that ability for that person to get a sense of what's happening in that home environment, what physical aspects are there, what challenges are there, and even in the virtual environment, there's a limited interaction. And that interaction can also be monitored and can be adjusted or changed based on the nature of who may be in that home with that child or children. We also, in terms of Vibes reporting, there's been an increase in our chat function. So one of the things that you'll see a little bit later on in my presentation is if you go to our website, which is www.vibes.org, you'll see a chat box pop up. And you'll have the ability to type confidentially with anyone, with a member of our hotline staff about anything or anyone that may be problematic for you in that given environment. And we are noticing that children are really taking advantage of this opportunity to engage with us in a safe way, in a way where they can't be overheard. So we are seeing some changes in the way that children are sort of stumbling upon our services and also using them, to ask questions and to potentially indicate things that are going on in their lives. In terms of things that we've seen at Vibes, in terms of the counseling that we're currently experiencing, we have children experiencing many different types of stressors due to the pandemic, going through stages of grief for actual loss that they may have experienced. They may have experienced the loss of a family member, of a friend, of a student, of a teacher, from COVID-19. So they may be actually physically going through those stages of grief. They may also be grieving for the loss of their friendships, of the connection, the people-to-people connection that they're used to. And, keeping in mind that, with adults, let's say, or, people who choose to structure more of their interactions online, people, let's say, who are trying online dating as examples, we're choosing to make that choice, right? But in the pandemic, none of us really chose to completely structure our interactions in the way that we have. And this is really, really resonating with children. They're feeling extremely overwhelmed, lots of depression, lots of anxiety, and fears about the future. How long will this last? How will this affect me? How will this affect my family? And they're noticing the stressors that their families are affecting as well. If we can move on to the next slide, please.
Vamos a pasar a la siguiente lámina.
So the next really crucial area here.
Entonces la siguiente área crucial aquí es.
I'm sorry, Taryn. I just want to make sure that the audio is getting
Nada más quiero ver que
channeled
el
correctly.
está siendo traducido correctamente. ¿Aló?
Should I continue, Melody?
¿Continúo?
Give me 1 second. Sorry. Let us know, Joe, once it's all good to go.
Hola, 1, 2, ¿me escuchan? ¿Me escucha?
Yes, it's just the channels are intertwining. I just want to make sure that we fix it.
Can you hear me or can I continue interpreting?
Juan Carlos is up.
Okay.
Is it good to go, Joe? Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Taryn.
No problem at all. So the next really crucial area that we really want to focus on right now, and that is a huge focus at Vibes specifically, is cyberbullying. So this is really, in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of all that we are experiencing, this is really where children, college students, really anyone that's part of the K through 12 or the college experience is really dealing with uncharted waters. So with children specifically. So right now they may be seeking out more or less screen time for themselves based on how they're processing the pandemic, feelings that they're dealing with, feelings of isolation, withdrawal, and some children are choosing to go deeper into that screen time and really look for communities and opportunities and ways to connect, and others are choosing different ways to try to seek out those connections. But this can really exacerbate the depression, the feelings of loss and withdrawal. And when children are feeling insecure, when they're feeling isolated, when they're feeling with that withdrawal, they tend to feel also very vulnerable. And, communication is very different when it's strictly through, let's say, a virtual platform or through a text message or through an email. And that physical component of the body language and communication and just the nature of human interaction, many of the things that many of us are craving and missing, about lack of proximity, lack of being able to celebrate and really experience group functions and group activities and things like that. This is really affecting children as well. There's also a lack of precedent in many, many ways for this. So at the college level right now with Title IX regulations, there is absolutely no precedent and no standard for anything that could happen to a college student as a result of cyberbullying, online harassment, cyber stalking. There are colleges that can choose to create their policies, but there is no precedent and there is no way to go about doing this at the college level. Then down to the K through 12 level, it's exactly the same thing. There's no precedent for reporting mechanisms for children to be able to, or parents or teachers, if they suspect that a child is being harassed or bullied or stalked virtually. There's very little information, concrete procedure on how to actually go about navigating those challenges and how to collect that evidence and how to advocate and how to make that stop. Really, because most of what we deal with at Vibes when we're experiencing cases of children who are dealing with cyberbullying, stalking, harassment, they want this behavior to stop. So they're looking for our help and our advice and our advocacy for navigating the proper channels to get this information to the people who need it and to get this information to people who will help not only stop this behavior, but prevent future children from experiencing this behavior. And by the time this happens, in the event it does happen, the trauma has already occurred. The child has already experienced, a deep experience with cyberbullying, with stalking, with harassment, where the child no longer feels safe in an environment, in a situation where they may already have lots of reason and a huge predisposition to already feel unsafe and insecure. So it becomes a challenging environment within an already challenging environment. In terms of what Vibes can do to help with this. So, I've mentioned a little bit before, our counseling, our advocacy, and I will be giving you all of that information on a couple of slides in a moment. But as to reiterate, children and teens can call our hotline. They can also seek services, starting at 3 years old and at 14 years old without parental consent. But with that being said, with our hotline and with our chat, children can call, or teens and youth can call and ask questions or get advice, and it never has to go any further. And no one is notified in the event that they're under 14 years old and they made a call to Vibes or they called our hotline. If you could go to the next slide, please. So with domestic violence, we've heard, many of us have heard and have seen, in the news and in various publications, the incidences of domestic violence becoming not only more prevalent and more pervasive right now, but more of something that people are talking about. People are aware of the isolation and loneliness and despair that many people feel right now, and adding the layers of potential or actualized abuse, especially for a child or for a parent, or for that child to be witnessing, in a family system, is, something that is extremely, problematic for individuals right now, and for parents and families, particularly for our Spanish-speaking clients and their families. So what we are finding at Vibes right now is that while we continue to remain a safe space and open and available for clients, for in-person appointments and virtual appointments, many of our Spanish-speaking clients who cannot physically come to the office don't feel comfortable or can't be overheard speaking to us on the phone for a virtual counseling session. There either is no safe space for them in their home. There's no physical space for them to go. They may be watched very closely, and there's an element of embarrassment or shame that someone in that house or home may hear or get a sense of what that person may be wanting to express to their counselor. Because many of the clients that we work with at Vibes, many of them have very limited or no support systems, or their support systems are very, very small, and very few people, if anyone, are aware of the abuse or the experiences that they're enduring and the trauma that they're going through. In addition, our SAME program, which stands for Sexual Assault Nurse Examination Program, our number of cases have gone up significantly since people have started to return to work and a little bit more of that normalized routine as we have gone through the phases of reopening in New York State. So what that means is that as people have been able to make a phone call to us, or as people have been able to get that safe space, they've actually been able to connect with us and receive services. And for our SANE program, this is for individuals to disclose if they've been a victim of rape or sexual assault. A child, a teen, any individual in the community can request a forensic exam to be performed on them so that they can use that evidence in the event that they would like to bring about charges. Up to 20 years, they have to make that decision. So we have seen a dramatic increase in those cases. We've seen 5 cases a day, whereas we would normally be seeing 5 cases a week. So we've seen increasing amounts of people not only seeking our services, but reports of these incidences as well. We've also seen with senior abuse and neglect, this continues to be on the rise. As things like unemployment and benefit checks may be delayed, or people are losing their jobs and unable to support themselves, we're seeing a financial neglect increase for people who are pressing on their grandparents, their mothers, their fathers, significant others who are seniors to utilize those benefits because there is no money coming in, and utilizing threats of abuse and neglect as a mechanism to do that. We've also seen, like I mentioned before, our chats have increased, the number of chats. So while people may not always feel safe to call us, and we've seen an increase in our hotline calls as well, they've also been utilizing our chats. So they've wanted and needed to connect with us more. Next slide, please. And just to give you a little bit of a sense of all of Vibes, because I've sort of mentioned Vibes a little bit here and there, but I want to give you a sense of everything that we do, because all of our services are free with the exception of our legal consultations. We offer legal consultations free of charge. And in the event, based on how you are moving forward with us or with a referral, then we would take it from there with you. But every single thing that you see on this screen is all free, and it's all services that we provide for clients in Suffolk County. So advocacy services, court accompaniment, help with orders of protection, for any of the issues that you see listed on your slide, advocacy, survivors of intimate partner abuse, sexual violence, child abuse, elder abuse, human trafficking, and veterans with PTSD and MST. Community educations like the one I'm doing now. We frequently are in, trainings with professionals, with schools, with municipalities, with townships, to be able to not only spread the word, but to connect with other individuals who are in need of our services or who want to spread our message further. Counseling services, so crisis appointments and long-term counseling appointments. As I've mentioned, we continue to see clients virtually and in person as well. Our hotline, our Sane and Safe program, and legal services, all of which are available by picking up the phone and inquiring about our services to see if they're right for you. Our hotline is listed here, 631-360-3606, with our main office, 360-3730. Our chat is available at vibes.org. Next slide, please. And just as a reminder, we do not ask for your legal status. We are inclusive and welcoming of all members of the community, including our veterans, children, the elderly, LGBTQ, families of survivors. Again, you will be heard, you will be believed, and you will not risk your safety by calling us. Everything that we present to you at Vibes is 100% directed by you. So if you want to move forward with something or not, we follow your lead. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time and welcome any questions that anybody has now or at the duration.
Thank you so much, Taryn. Really so much wonderful resources, and we're really grateful for your time and really, sharing all this information, valuable resource with us. Thank you again for being part of our webinar. At this moment, I would like to introduce to you Susan Iogel. She's the Nassau County Department of Human Services, Office of Mental Health, Chemical Dependency, and Developmental Disability Services. Susan, again, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Lucia, for the welcome. And hello, Senator Brooks. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. It's a privilege and a wonderful opportunity to speak about very important topics. And also thank you to the team. I know these webinars have a lot of moving parts, and I think you guys have it down pat. So as Lucia said, I work for Nassau County, the Department of Human Services, Office of Mental Health. And I wear many hats in the department, but one of the hats that I wear is I act as a liaison or a contact person or a go-between between our office and citizens, constituents, residents, people in the community, and colleagues who have questions about OPWDD. OPWDD being the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. So I spend most of my time fielding phone calls, people who have questions, they're not sure who to call, might not be sure how to fill out paperwork, or they may have run into some glitches. So my job is to field those calls and to help those callers with the best knowledge that I have. And I also reach out to OPWDD to coordinate and collaborate with them. So at the end, I'll give you my phone number. If anybody would like to call me in the future, if you have any DD, developmental disabilities related questions, you're more than welcome to give me a call. In the next 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to tell you about mental health services that are available for children, adults, and students who have a mental health problem. And the National Association for the Dual Diagnosed estimates that about 1/3 of people with a developmental disability have a mental health problem. And in the last several weeks, I've been calling the agencies in Nassau County that provide mental health counseling for children, students, and adults who have a developmental disability. And on the next slide, you'll see that I started asking the agencies, what are you seeing? What are people calling for help with? What are some of the more common presenting problems? So if we can move to the next slide, we'll see that the agencies, there are only 4 agencies in Nassau County that provide counseling services specifically for students, children, and adults and their families with a developmental disability. But it was interesting to hear that all 4 of them said that the more common presenting problems that people are calling for help with are anxiety and depression. And of course, COVID-related stress. And after the last few days, we might we can maybe add hurricane or tropical storm stress, but definitely anxiety, depression, and some COVID-related stress. You'll see on the graphic there that all of the agencies are providing, they're all operational, functional, up and running, and they're all providing telehealth. Sometimes telehealth means just a telephone, but more often telehealth is the audio and the video and the virtual technique that we're using tonight. So they're all up and running, and as I said, mostly seeing anxiety and depression. And I think it's worth noting that in the general population, people who do not have a developmental disability, the most common presenting problems are also anxiety and depression. So those of us who do not have a developmental disability really share something in common with people who do have a developmental disability, and that we're kind of all in this together with, some anxiety and depression. And I just have to note that a former First Lady today self-disclosed to the media that she suffers from depression on occasion. And I was happy to hear her self-disclose that, because I think that will go a long way for minimizing the stigma that people might feel about seeking help. So we have our first slide here about one of the agencies that provides services, advanced care, diagnostic, and treatment. One of the nice things about advanced care is that they have two locations. They have a North Shore location in Brookville, and they have a South Shore location in Freeport. And they're staffed by psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and they also have Spanish-speaking staff. And they provide individual counseling and family support. I just spoke with them last week to confirm that they're operational, and the person to call for information is Miguel Rivera, and he can be reached at 686-4400. So if any of our listeners or viewers or for this archive would like to call for information, Miguel would be the person to call. The second agency that provides services, and I would like to note I did this in alphabetical order, so it's not that I have a preference for one agency over the other. Charles Evans Center is located on South Oyster Bay Road in Bethpage, in the Bethpage, Hicksville, Plainview area, eastern Nassau County. I've been to their facility a number of times. It's a new building. They offer a lot of services, medical services as well, and also mental health counseling services. They have Spanish-speaking staff available, and they too provide telehealth, counseling, individual counseling, and family support from psychiatrists, social workers, and psychologists. Confirmed last week with their contact person, that would be Andrea Pincus, and she can be reached at 622-8888. If anyone has any questions about scheduling or appointments or insurance, they're welcome to give Andrea a call. The third agency that specifically provides mental health counseling for people with a developmental disability is CP Nassau. CP Nassau has been around for many years. I've been to their facility a few times. Very nice professional people, and they're located on Washington Avenue in Freeport. And one of the nice things about CP Nassau is it's right on a bus line. And I have to note that I myself wrongly assume that everyone in Nassau has a car and drives, and that is incorrect. So many Nassau residents rely on public
Muchos de los
transportation.
residentes de Nassau.
So many residents rely on public transportation, so they can get to CP Nassau by bus, which is worth noting. Like the other agencies, they're up and running, operational, doing telehealth and individual counseling, family counseling, etc. The contact number there is 377-2111. And our last agency slide is Epic, Long Island. Epic is right on Hempstead Turnpike in East Meadow. It's also right on a bus line. The busy lines, the N70, 71, and 72 run along there. And Epic is right on the corner of Hempstead Turnpike and the Meadowbrook Parkway. I've been to their site a number of times, very welcoming people, very professional staff, provide counseling, individual counseling, family support, psychiatrists, psychologists, and social workers. And they have made a particular note that everybody's kind of responded pretty well to the virtual counseling. There were some questions about telephone or the audio visual, but they made a particular note that it worked out quite well. So those are the only four that are kind of specifically designed for people with developmental disabilities. But I would like to share two more slides. And although I'm a tremendous promoter of formal mental health treatment, I'm a mental health provider myself, and I believe in it and I support it. Sometimes the best person to understand what it's like to have a developmental disability is another person with a developmental disability. And there are a number of grassroots community-based organizations in the community. So I've identified a few, again, no rhyme or reason, just a few that I've worked with before. And I would just like to mention their names and a few phrases from their websites and their mission statements that I thought were inspiring for people who have a developmental disability and of course their families. SANY's, Self-Advocacy Association of New York, is a very large organization. A common theme that you hear on their site is I have a voice. So for any viewers or listeners, or if any persons with a developmental disability ever view this, always remember that you do have a voice. Second organization, SOYAN, supporting our youth and adults, do a lot of work with individuals. And their phrase, embarking on a journey. And I like the word journey because it implies a lifetime. And it is a journey of a lifetime. So SOYAN is a wonderful organization. And then there are two others that the email contacts are there, Special Advocacy and also Independent Us. And lastly, for the next slide, just as sometimes moms and dads also benefit from formal mental health treatment for anxiety, depression, stress, but sometimes the person who might be able to empathize most or best understand what it's like to have a child with a developmental disability is another mom or dad. So here are some organizations, again, no rhyme or reason, I just picked a few that I was familiar with. Parent to Parent of New York State, Reducing Isolation, and we all know the types of isolation that moms and dads can go through. Long Island CSS and Friends, Connecting, Learning, Meeting Up. And lastly, SOYAN, once again, provides a lot of social support for families. So I think that individuals and families, I would definitely encourage them to get treatment if they feel the need. But these grassroots informal organizations also provide us with a mental health boost as well. So finally, our final slide, that is our contact information. And for those who might have a pen or a piece of paper, my first name is Susan, S-U-S-A-N. My phone number is 227-7346, 227-7346. I'd be happy to answer questions at the end of the evening tonight, but don't hesitate to call me in my office and I'll do whatever I can to help you if you might, anything that you might need help with. So I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to turn it back over to Lucia.
Susan, thank you so much for such, wonderful resources that you have provided us. We really appreciate your time. And, it's important that we know that there is a start to this journey to healing, right? With so many different resources. At this moment, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Eric Walsh, but before I do that, I just want to highlight, besides him being a medical director and public health specialist, he is actually a very highly sought out after speaker, and he has done lectures and also preached all over the world. And, it's important to know that Dr. Walsh, seeks to continue to serve the Lord throughout the preaching and healing ministry. And, he has a lot of wonderful knowledge, and we are so grateful to have you here with us, Dr. Walsh. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to be here with us. And if you want to take maybe a minute just to say something, but we have a couple of questions that are very important that we'd like to ask that you answer in addressing this issue with mental health.
Sure, and I would definitely chime in and say that after listening to Taryn and then just the previous speaker, I think there's some very strong mental health experts on here. Really appreciated Taryn's comment on stress. She really, I don't think I've heard anyone describe kind of what collectively our communities and families are going through around stress better than she just did. So I appreciate that, and I'll kind of use that as a springboard. There's a lot that's going on. I accidentally put in early for our Facebook page for Slave Food. We're a project for African Americans. You can go to Facebook at Slave Food or YouTube at Slave Food Project around the connection between stress and diet and how that actually impacts mental health and overall health altogether. So we'll get right into it. I think one of the biggest things really bothering people right now is stress. How do you manage this stress? How does that impact people in terms of things like anxiety and depression? As was just said, the former First Lady of the country just said that she's suffering from low-grade, I would argue maybe intermittent bouts of depression. Maybe it's chronic and constant, but it doesn't matter how much money you make, or how or how little money you make, or where you live. Depression is a no respecter of persons. Anxiety is no respecter of persons. And I want you to really get the power of this because it causes stress. I was out on my morning walk this morning. One of my good friends, a retired physician, I ran into him on the walk, and he's literally going through severe depression. And it has to do with three things. The first thing is the extended reality of the coronavirus pandemic. The second is he said the riots and the cases of injustice, which he just blew his mind. This is an older Jewish gentleman who's just phenomenal, but he just said he just couldn't believe what he has seen in terms of injustice and even the response. And then third, of course, this tropical storm that just hit the eastern seaboard, and here in Connecticut, half the houses in the state were without power. So I'm actually in a warehouse in the back of one of our clinics so that I could be on because we have no power, no internet. And all of these things are cumulative. And there's an equation I like to use called the stress equation. And the stress equation says that stress equals demands minus resources. Stress equals your demands, your life demands, your day-to-day grind, the pressures on you, your demands minus your resources. What can you bring to the table in order to help? And I think a lot of people wind up with a lot of stress, and chronic stress is pro-inflammatory. The research is beginning to show us that chronic stress actually increases by releasing lots of cortisol. First and foremost, I'm a medical doctor, and I've worked in the Obama administration and Bush administration on projects around HIV. But stress has been my passion. When I did my doctorate in public health, that's what I looked at. And stress increases the release of cortisol, which literally makes it so that your immune system doesn't respond properly. It actually hijacks your immune system to some extent and makes you kind of like resistant to the normal responses. So you develop kind of a tolerance and you stay in a hyperinflammatory state. What we now know is that hyperinflammation affects the brain. And so that inflammation contributes to the anxiety and the depression. It's not just purely psychological. There is an actual organic component, especially when you pull into play the digestive tract. In some cases has more of the receptors for neurotransmitters than the brain does. And that's why you feel some of the stuff like down in your gut. So with all of that said, I think what's important is we are facing a time that is unprecedented. I think this may be one of the worst years, definitely of my life, in terms of just the scale of what's going on outside of a war. And we need, people need to know what they can do to protect themselves. And I want to make sure up front, I say that many of the services that were just mentioned are key. You need a safe place to bring your stress, your feelings of anxiety, your bouts of depression. You do need a safe place. And the telehealth world has exploded because of the coronavirus. I'm hoping that people still get soon a chance to sit in front of therapists. Nothing replaces that. So everything else I'm going to say, I want to make sure I highlight the importance of actually going in, breaking stigmas, which is a lot of what we've heard a little bit about already, because that is important. But I do want to mention that you have to have places you can trust and people you can trust. And as a Christian, I believe you have to have some higher power, whatever religion you are, that you can also trust. And you've got to have some place to bring all these things that are stressing you, because those are healthy resources. And so I'll let you start asking the questions and kind of weave in some of the other things that I wanted to talk about.
Thank you very much. And, the first question we have here is, what can someone do to overcome anxiety, depression, or feeling of hopelessness?
All right, so again, there are probably others on here that can answer this as well. I would say what I tell my patients when they come in anxious and depressed, I ask them about certain lifestyle things. Obviously, I try to make sure there's not a chronic stressor in their life or ongoing trauma or undealt with trauma, because those things would cause me to want to send them to where they could really get therapy. And a lot of times that happens anyway. But I do want to mention to people that there are other things that are very important in managing all these things. One of them is sleep. And what we found is that because we're so addicted to electronic devices, we now know that even the blue light that comes from your phones and tablets and computer screens, TV screens, actually interrupts sleep. When you don't sleep, that is also pro-inflammatory. And I'm going to tell you why I keep using the word pro-inflammatory in a minute. And what happens is, you can't sleep well. If you don't get to the deepest levels of sleep, you don't get true rest, the rapid eye movement sleep. And that is actually when your immune system repairs itself and does its work. So you will be off, and more of the feelings, your brain will get restless, and that can feed your anxiety and actually fuel your depression, just because you're not getting the rest that you need. So that's one of the things I'd mention. The second thing I'd mention is our exercise regimen. Getting outside and actually walking while it's warm now in the summertime is actually very important, because you release natural endorphins. It's like internal medicine that actually raises your mood, and at the same time circulates blood and lowers inflammation. So I would argue that just going for walks when the day is not hot, in the early mornings or in the evenings at dusk, are some of the most important things you can actually do to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And of course, you can get into further exercise regimens than that, but at least a good brisk walk, 30 minutes, an hour a day is really important. Sunlight, we now know, is very important. The vitamin D levels here, vitamin D is so critical. I'm gonna jump ahead in the story here. One of the reasons coronavirus is so scary is we don't really understand it. What we do know is that it creates a hyperinflammatory state. I want everybody to get that. So it's hyperinflammation that causes the death and disease, not the virus itself necessarily. It's the body's reaction to it. So if you're already in a hyperinflammatory state because you're stressed, because you're not sleeping, because you're not exercising, and because you're not getting enough fresh air, which I'll come back around to maybe as well, sunlight is one of the natural ways to raise vitamin D levels and drop some of that inflammation. What the studies have now shown is that there is a correlation, really inverse correlation between vitamin D levels and the severity of coronavirus infection. So we know vitamin D levels in general and sunlight are good for mood, hence why we get some seasonal disorders around mental health. But even for fighting this virus, the ultraviolet rays of the sun kill the virus and increases your body's ability to fight the virus. So I want to emphasize sunlight. And then I really want to land on something we talk a lot about in slave food, and that is how your diet affects all of this. And what we know is that the standard American diet, the SAD diet, which is the best way to describe it, is SAD, the processed, highly refined, full of oils, full of added sugars, so far away from a simple whole food plant-based diet regimen, is pro-inflammatory. If you get nothing else from what I'm gonna say, get this. If you really want to protect yourself from the virus, improve your mental health, go back to a very basic diet of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, and vegetables. That could change a lot about you, will help to improve your mental health status. Again, if you really have some issues you need to deal with a therapist, I still say that you need to go see the therapist, but we have underestimated this. And in our slave food project, we talk a lot about how the food deserts and the food swamps that are really endemic in Black, Latino, low-income neighborhoods, even rural, poor white neighborhoods. These food swamps of fast food, which are calorie-dense, nutritionally sparse foods, are a big problem because they're pro-inflammatory. So no one's talking about this, but when you look at the health disparities related to coronavirus, I believe this is a strong contributor to why you see Blacks and Latinos doing worse, besides a host of other things. But the other part of it is that there are food deserts. There's a scarcity in many of those communities for fresh fruits and vegetables and that are affordable. And high quality. So I definitely want to throw that in there, and then really talk about the consistency of all of this. In a time, this is a prolonged stressful period. We know that the way that we're designed, we have a stress response, which is a fight or flight response, which works good if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, but it does not work well if every day, all day, you feel like you're being chased by a tiger. It just doesn't work well. And so finding those places of strength in your family, in your faith community, through professionals, that many great resources were just mentioned. Those are all really important places to go to manage this, because anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues don't just go away by themselves. Even though people don't want to talk about them, they don't just get better because we ignore them. So I want to really encourage people to not only address them, but look at the lifestyle things that can be done to help as well.
Very well. The next question I have, since we were talking about parents and their children, is how can a parent tell if their child is depressed?
I would say there's a lot of things you can look at, but one of the things that in my practice that I've noticed is that when we often find this is the child's behavior changes. So a child is normally very active, robust, in a good mood, will become apathetic. They may really not want to do much. They may sleep more or less, but usually a lot of times they sleep more. And so you start seeing changes in how they eat. Sometimes they don't want to eat much of anything. Sometimes they just start eating a whole lot. And they might have trouble with their sleep as well. Their grades may change, go down. And of course, this can lead long-term, if you're having mental health issues long-term as a child, sometimes people try to self-medicate. And sometimes that's how drugs and alcohol can kind of come into the fray. But I would argue that most parents, if you know your child, you'll see some changes, but not always. So having a good line of communication with your child to find out what might be, where they are, and having baseline, regular, open communication with your child that's non-judgmental and very supportive and loving is one of the ways that your child can often tip you off.
That's great. So the next question I have, since we're talking about healthy eating and medication, what are some sustainable non-medication ways to overcome depression and anxiety?
So I mentioned a lot of them already. I will go back to the non-medication method of good mental health therapy, counseling, and support. I don't know that there's, singularly, I think that's kind of like the bedrock, in my opinion. I don't like medicating people unnecessarily, even though I'm a medical doctor. I think if you can avoid medications, you should. Some people will need it. But I want to go back to the idea that it is really important that you eat foods that are high in antioxidants, high in phytonutrients, which does not look like the stuff you get in the restaurants that create the food swamps, the bodegas, the corner stores that sell the highly processed, bagged foods that can stay on a shelf for seemingly an eternity. So, I want to encourage people to eat foods that feed their body and their mind in terms of going back to a plant-based diet for the most part. Even if you eat some animal product and some processed food, make that the 80, 90% of what you eat in order to really feed your body, lower your inflammation, and in that way battle depression by bringing down the inflammation.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a one question. I'll make it like two, so you could probably answer it within the same, because it has to do with the same, and then we'll conclude with those questions. One is, how do you guide a family member to get help, and what is the best therapy? And with that, if you could share what are some of the ways to find healing in overcoming any kind of mental issues, any kind of mental health issues.
So I have family members who have struggled with many of these things. In fact, one of my 13-year-old cousins actually took her life a year before last, and it was devastating to the family. I had to go, and I actually went and flew to Florida and eulogized her, and I can tell you, I still haven't recovered from it. Probably one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do and ever experienced. And there was an internet bullying component. I saw we talked about that a little earlier. And there were just some other things I won't even get into that were just unbelievable. And as a physician and as a family member, I had to go into the house and really encourage the rest of my relatives in that house of the importance of professional help. And that was not easy. Obviously, I think the last thing anybody wanted to do was to talk about what had just happened. But I think sometimes you have to know the benefits. Again, I want to go back to this point. There is power in a safe space. When you heard all of the different resources that have been listed so far on this program, what each one of them is trying to create for you is a safe place to deal with the difficulties, traumas, challenges of life. This is broader than race, ethnicity, income, socioeconomics, gender identity, or even sexual orientation. This is bigger than all of that. You have to have a place that's safe to go to talk to people if you're going to process pain, if you're going to process difficulty, if you're going to process all of the challenges that life gives you. And so I want to really encourage people that's what I try and encourage people of. I ask them, do you need a safe place? And how badly do you need that safe place? And a lot of times that's how I can encourage people to get into things that are, into places and into therapy that will be very helpful.
Well, thank you so much. If you want to just say one last thing about, any other ways of healing, and then we'll conclude with that.
So one of the things, I'll end with this, and that is that, the studies are pretty overwhelming around things like meditation and prayer as well. As someone who a faith believer, I do want to encourage people to leverage their faith and to turn to their higher power. This is how the whole Alcohol Anonymous program actually began. And in a time like this, it's difficult to make sense of things. And so if that is a part of your life, I want to encourage you to exercise that part of your life. Don't leave that on the shelf, because humans are spiritual beings as well. Even when people don't believe in God at all, they're still spiritual. And so those connections are very important. And I want to really encourage people to do that. When I get stressed, just personally, one of the things I like to remind myself of is a text my mother taught me, 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And I like to use that in a sense in order to remind myself that I'm not given over to fear, that I can be encouraged to deal with the difficulties of life. And this has been a difficult year, facing racial injustice, a pandemic, now a tropical storm, economic uncertainty. It can be overwhelming. And I think that's what a lot of Americans are feeling. But find your center and return to it, and trust in what you know to be powerful. For me, that's God, but everybody has their different thing, and use that to your advantage by talking to your faith leaders and trying to make in your process of trying to make sense of a year that started off we thought was just going to be the best year ever, the new decade, 2020 vision, and all of a sudden we're looking at a year that's been pretty messy.
Wow, thank you so much. That was really nice put together. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And it's a privilege to have had you here. Thank you for joining the webinar.
Thank you.
This moment, thank you so much. At this moment, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Gregson Pigotot. But before I do that, I just want to say that Dr. Pigot, he has served as the Director of Office of Minority Health for Suffolk County, the Department of Health Services, since 2009. And Dr. Pigot, he coordinates an annual conference devoted to eliminating health disparities. And past conferences have focused on obesity, diabetes, cancer, emergency services, and cultural literacy. There's so many things that he has done in the community, and he also organizes the Suffolk County Gospel Health Fest, which offers inspiration, entertainment, and health screenings. It's a privilege to have you here too as well, Doctor. Thank you for joining us. And I'm gonna ask Daphne if she could please, she's gonna go ahead and ask you certain questions. And if you would like to maybe take a minute or so of say something as well.
All right, very good, everybody. Thank you for having me this evening. Yeah, I'm serving now as the Commissioner of Health for Suffolk County Department of Health now since February 28th. I came on board, they had a nice little ceremony for me, and then the next week they had a kind of a swearing in. Then all of a sudden we have our first case of COVID-19 in Suffolk County. That was March 8th. And that's pretty much been my life since then, is dealing with the pandemic as it really mushroomed in Suffolk County during the month of March and in early April, really filled up our hospitals, really caused a lot of trauma, emotional trauma to our residents, caused a lot of people passing away. We've had nearly 2,000 COVID-19 related deaths in Suffolk County. And so that's been pretty much my life now in the Department of Health, just responding to that, really working with our communicable disease division to get our case investigation and contact tracing operation going. And so it's not over yet. We've gotten to a lull period now where in Suffolk County, we're about between 1% to 1.5% of the cases testing positive. In other words, if you have 5,000 people testing for COVID-19, between 50 and 80 of them are coming back positive. So we're in a good place in terms of that. The next thing on the radar is going to be the discussion about reopening schools. So we're actively engaged in that with the school superintendents. But COVID, we're in this for the long haul. There's still no vaccine yet. I know there are some encouraging vaccine trials. And as we get into the fall, maybe we'll hear a little bit more about that. And then if there's a vaccine that's approved, then it's a matter of getting the people vaccinated and getting that so-called herd immunity to the virus. So we still have a ways to go. I'm hoping August is kind of a lull month. I know once September hits and once Labor Day weekend hits and the schools are really in full swing, it's going to get very interesting around here. So that's where we are. I've been enjoyed the time so far as health commissioner as best you can during a pandemic. And then you spoke of my background directing an Office of Minority Health out of the health department. That was my first job in 2009. And so I've been doing that. And really that has been about advocacy and education in communities of color in Suffolk County. I'm not a mental health expert. I think Dr. Walsh covered it, some fantastic talking points he had. I really have nothing else to add, but he is on point. I will say that he is, that's everything you wanted to hear out of a mental health expert dealing with communities of color. He nailed it. So I am going to pass the microphone. I know Daphne did have some business with me, so I'll let her speak.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pigot. It's good to see you, and we've been working together for over 10 years since you first joined Suffolk County as Director of Minority for Health Matters. And in terms of the mental health clinics, can you help us learn about how many we have in Suffolk County and where are they located?
So Suffolk County itself, we have a robust division of mental hygiene that does some treatment. Really, we do a lot more contracting. We have agencies that we contract with to provide more treatment and services. But we do some ourselves. We have 2 mental health clinics in Farmingville. That would be sort of our headquarter clinic. It's right off of Nichols Road, north of the LIE. That's in Farmingville. I think it's Horse Block Place. And the other one is Brentwood Mental Health, which is right at the site of the Brentwood Health Center. There's a separate entrance and it will say Brentwood Mental Health. And there we do some treatments, some intakes. And so that's what we have. Yeah.
And how are those intakes and treatments continued during this time with the pandemic?
What we have been trying to do is to avoid doing face-to-face treatment as much as possible, just for the health of our providers and also for the health of the public. So we've really switched and embraced a telemedicine module. You know, we had to kind of ramp up and get used to it, but we find that our clients have taken to it and we're able to provide a lot of these services telephonically. In instances where we do need to meet clients face-to-face, we do it in large rooms that enable social distancing so that there's really no issues of exposure to COVID during a session.
Yes, thank you. And this question is, relates to COVID, but it also is a concern during normal times. And it is that many times our Latino parents won't take their children to a psychologist or a social emotional therapist. However, they will take their children to a pediatrician. So how do we ensure that pediatricians in Suffolk County are screening for mental issues and recommending mental health services to parents?
Yeah, that's an ongoing dialogue that we have to have with our pediatric community. Because when you screen for emotional trauma, adverse childhood experiences, and you find positives, then it's a question of now what? Because you're going to need psychologist, mental health treatment team in place or a source of referral. So we always try to advocate for that the pediatricians have a source of referrals. We have the Family Service League, they call it the DASH Center, Diagnostic Assessment Stabilization Hub. That's in Hall Park. That is for mental health crises. That's a good way to get in the door if you have a child that's suffering from a real serious emotional crisis. That number is 631-952-3333. That is a 24/7 hotline. They also have in-person assessments for mental health crises. That's a good way to get into the door. But going back to your original question, the pediatric community, it's really important that they have a way to refer for treatment. They can screen and assess and say, yes, this child is suffering from emotional trauma, but they need to always have a place to refer to. And so I know there's some resources here. We have some resources also internally that we can share with the group.
Thank you, Dr. Pigot. And thank you for all the work that you do for our diverse communities and the Suffolk County region.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really are privileged to have 2 amazing doctors with us here today. And right now, I would like to introduce to you Jessica Fernandez. Again, she's the Partnership Specialist in Community Engagement for the U.S. Census. And Jessica, if you could please share with us the importance of, the census.
You're muted, Jessica. I'm sorry.
Every week. Thank you so much, and especially to the Senator John Brooks, because he's really committed to share this information about the census. Census is happening right now, and we expect to finish September 30. So we have less than 2 months to complete our census, and especially in the low response areas like Wandash, Freeport, Brentwood, Central Isley. So it's very important that we can do the census online, by phone, or by mail. We are having also one MQA event in the Freeport Memorial Library this Friday. If you are not completing your census yet, you can go. We will have a representative in Spanish and one in Creole. So you are more than welcome. We have different languages in which you can complete the census. Yeah, next one. We have the phone numbers. If you want to do it by phone, you can do it by phone. If you are not receiving the questionnaire by mail, you can reach us for these phone numbers. And the census questionnaire is very simple. Name, address, phone number, age, race, ethnicity, sex, rent. And these questions are specific to distribute the funds, the federal funds that we need for our community. That's it. We don't have any other question that the question that you are seeing right now, that is name, address, phone number, age, where you live, and who the people that are living with you. Right now, we are still under the national rate, so we need to do our best to increase this self-response. We only have until September 30. These are the areas that we have here in between Nassau that we need to increase. And if you want to do something very important for the census besides complete it, you can apply for jobs. We are still looking at recruiting. You can go to the website 2020 census.gov/jobs. So we are offering jobs right now like recruiting, enumerators, or census tracers. So please, we ask your help for this moment to complete the census. The census is important, is easy, and is safe to do it. For us, the most important thing is to count every person one time in the right place. That's it. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Jessica. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to either Melody or Joe if there's any questions that they might see in the Q&A section or even in the chat. And after that, I would like to turn it to the Senator for final remarks. But Joe and Melody, are there any questions?
Thank you, Lucia. We had a couple come up in the chat while we were going through our presentations. Timothy Denton was asking earlier on, many of us are accustomed to online communication, video conferencing, etc. Younger people even more so. What can people do to counter feelings of isolation and depression that result from severely limited personal contact that most of us are now experiencing? Now, Dr. Walsh, I know you gave a lot of great suggestions for that, but I thought maybe I'd ask this question again to see if anyone else on the panel has some additional thoughts and ideas on this. Would anyone like to take that?
I would also just mention again from the Vibes perspective, mentioning the parents as well. Many people don't realize with Vibes that you can make a call or basically express frustration. We've talked to, parents and caregivers about feelings of stress and increased anxiety that are making them feel more aggressive or making them feel like they might want to, tip the scale and perhaps do something or say something that they may not be wanting to do in other circumstances. So a lot of people feel like if they connect with Vibes, they have to kind of lock in and commit to a process. But we also want to remind people that this is here for you to express your frustrations. Again, piggybacking on what what both doctors had mentioned, having that safe space, creating that opportunity for people to express what they're going through without any fear of retribution or judgment.
Susan?
Oh, yes, thank you. I'd just like to mention that it's an oversight on my part. Our office in Nassau County, we do have a helpline. It's a talk line. The talk line number is 227-8255. And many callers are seeking kind of concrete service information, but we also receive a fair number of callers from young people who just are looking for someone to talk to, kind of a sympathetic ear. So that is a service that, you know, is available and might be useful for you, you know, young people just wanting to speak to someone for a little empathy and support.
Thank you, Susan. And for those of you that are interested, I did just type in the phone number in the chat, in the webinar chat. So once again, it's 516-227-8255. Are there any other questions out there? If you can raise, if anyone that's in attendance wants to raise their hand, we can let you speak. I'll give you a minute or so. Oh, hold on a second. We have Timothy Denton. Timothy, I'm just going to let you talk. So go ahead. You're on mute. Go ahead, Timothy. Timothy, can you hear us? All right. We should have him on. Timothy, obviously we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, so maybe if you type into the chat thing, I'll read it for you. All right. Well, let's. Lucia, I'm gonna turn it back to you. Timothy Denton certainly knows how to get in touch with us, and I'm happy to. We can take his call. Oh, where it is. Oh, he was simply asking for contact information for Dr. Walsh or his organization. So, Dr. Walsh, if you're still with us, if you could just reiterate what that might be.
You can go to www.slavefood.org, and you can go to our YouTube channel at Slave Food Project, or Facebook, which is at Slave Food. Tomorrow night, actually, we will have Chef Babette, the great vegan chef out of Inglewood, California. You don't want to miss that, as well as the borough president for the borough of Brooklyn, New York. Will be on, and we'll be talking about whole food, plant-based lifestyles and how they can benefit health and how they changed. You definitely want to hear the story of Chef Babette, who came through trauma and serious mental health challenges. I don't want to steal her story, but now is one of the premier whole food plant-based chefs in the country. So we'll be doing that tomorrow night. Go to our website and check that out, and check us out. And you can get in touch with me through that. And my email was actually put up here somewhere, so I can post that again as well.
All right, thank you very much. Folks, thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it back over to Lucia, who's going to wrap it up for us.
Yes. Again, thank you to all the speakers. Really an amazing job. I really want to congratulate you. And, you know, everyone, thank you for being here with us. But I would like to turn it over to Senator John Brooks for any final remarks that he might have.
Thank you, Lucia. Am I unmuted? I don't know.
You're good. You're loud and clear, sir.
Okay, good. First, I just think this was outstanding tonight. For all of the speakers, I say thank you very much. To the staff that put this together, just an incredible job. Dr. Walsh, you know, this has been a trying year, to say the least. I had the opportunity to live through 1968, which was just a bag of tricks too. I'm thinking 68 was worse than this year, except this year may end up with more chapters to the book than we want to have. But I think all of you did such a great job. This pandemic, coupled with the other events, is just incredible. I think the financial impact of what's happening hasn't been fully realized yet, and we've all got to be concerned. And this isn't meant politically now, please. But Washington seems to be turning a deaf ear on just how tough it is for everyone. And, you know, we look at the school districts and the concern that people have about returning back to school. At the same time, the kids want to see their friends. It's a big piece. I think all of you guys just hit on great points. You know, this is something, the comments most of you made is something people need to see. It talks a lot about the world we're living in right now. It's the axis are kind of tilted right now. And I just think you did a great job. I can never thank you all enough. But I just think tonight, this program was a home run in every way. I think you got very important messages out. You opened up windows of hope at the same point. And I just, you know, I sat here with each presentation and just thought you hit things people have to hear. You did it, you know, all of you that spoke, your heart is in this work. I don't think you see it as work. I think you see it as a passionate journey you're going down. And your contribution to this program was outstanding. Your commitment to what's happening is outstanding. The advice you gave, terrific. You know, I just, you know, I sat here and from one presentation to the next, it's just how on point you were. You know, as we work up in the legislature right now, we try to figure out what to do with bills and how to address certain issues right now that we have, and we watch our country in some ways tearing itself apart. I would love to take the commentary that you had and bring the state Senate and Assembly together and the governor and just let it play, because you know, the advice and the information you gave tonight, we all need to take to heart. So normally I wrap up pretty quick, but I just was so impressed with everybody tonight. It really, it was outstanding. So I can't say thank you enough to all of you. So I thank God we were able to get, the staff was able to get such fine presenters, and that each of you truly spoke to everybody who was participating. You know, it wasn't a presentation like a science project. It was a presentation and direction on a troubled world we're living in, and many people are having issues they don't even realize to an extent. But I don't mean to be rambling on, but I just got to drive home how great what you guys did tonight is. So thank you ever so much. And to the staff, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Senator Brooks. We really appreciate it, truly, with everything you do and your leadership for making this happen as well. It's because of your vision. So we're really grateful for you as well. And again, thank you to all the guest speaker, Taryn, Suzanne, Dr. Walsh, and Dr. Pigot. Thank you so much. And our wonderful work group. Thank you so much. So in our audience, I don't want to forget you. You're an amazing. We do this because of you. So right now, I would like to invite you to our next webinar. Upcoming webinar will be next, it would be actually August 20th, and we're going to be talking about school reopening plans in District 8. So please share it with everyone that you know. This is done for you. So please share the webinars with families, friends, and the community. Thank you again, everybody, for being here with us tonight. Thank you. We've been truly blessed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you,
time.
everyone.
And have a
Have a
great
good night.
weekend. Great job.